Welcome to MalcolmPresents.com and our new show, Manning Up. Actually, it's not a new show. It's a show that we had conversations with Deborah, which you can go back in the and find those shows. But now we have a new one, Manning Up. And Deborah, it's Deborah Manning. And again, you're listening to it on MalcolmPresents.com, a streaming platform that reaches the world and beyond. And I have no idea where beyond is. I don't think anyone does. But and the new show, Manning Up, is basically it's Deborah Manning, and that's her name. And we talk about individual responsibility and how
Nice to
that's
see nice to see you again. This is show number two we have,
show
and
number
I
two.
decided, yeah, and I decided to go back on this podcast because I think at this point right now, individual responsibility is going to save us. We're in real dire straits here in America. We all know that
Well,
with the
you can't.
inflation, with all kinds of things going around around the world and what have you, and you can get very depressed, very depressed. What can I possibly do? And I thought to myself, because I've become very politically active here in Greenville, South Carolina. I originally am from Southern California and moved
Do they have
here with.
politics in Greenville, South
I beg your
Carolina?
pardon?
Do they have a government there, Greenville?
Are you joking?
I'm
Absolutely,
joking. I'm
absolutely.
I'm becoming an urban snob. I lived half of my life in New York City, and the other half of my life in Los Angeles.
Well, you would be very surprised about Greenville. It is a great mix between the rural feelings of South Carolina, which is very rural and mostly farmland, but then also it's got a real good smattering of New York and a good smattering of Los Angeles. I'm not talking about the politics particularly, but
Mm.
I'm talking about the accessibility to arts and culture. The restaurant scene here is absolutely phenomenal. And I moved here with my dear husband and two kitty cats from Southern California when we no longer could afford Southern California. I was born
Good.
there and couldn't afford to stay there any longer.
Just a question about restaurants. Do you have a
Yeah.
good Chinese restaurant?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay. Do they make good pizza?
Yes, they do.
And can you get good bagels?
Yes, we can. Yeah,
Then it's a cosmopolitan area as far as I'm concerned.
there you go. So you're on your way. You are always invited, Malcolm. You know that. But I chose deciding to go back on the air again with Malcolm, and decided to make the show name Manning Up. My last name, of course, is Manning, and the whole idea is when you are manning up, you're taking personal responsibility for your life, and that's phenomenally important these days. Um, Regardless of what happens in the presidential election of 2024 of this year, you still have to cope with your own life. And if you watch the, if you watch any bit of news, it is incredibly depressing with border problems, with inflation problems, with the inattention to the plight of normal, average, everyday Americans like you and me. It can get to be rather depressing. I have a quote here that I want to go ahead and I'm going to put my glasses on here.
Yeah.
Interesting quote. This is from Admiral James Stockdale. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. And back in September of 1965, he was shot down and was forced to eject to save his own life. This was, of course, during the Vietnam War. When they captured the North Vietnamese captured him, they didn't really know that they were going to be taking on a very, very troublesome prisoner. He managed to escape, obviously, but his quote, I think, is really a theme that I've adopted. He said, quote, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." The most brutal facts of our current reality is that America is going down the tubes. And the brutal facts of it is that they don't want us in the middle class here anymore. Either you need to be destitute or you need to be ultra rich. That's one of the reasons that I was forced to move from my native California here to Greenville, did that 8 years ago. And talk about personal responsibility. I will be having interviews with a whole variety of people here who subscribe to that quote, but also have done some remarkable things to be able to turn their lives around. I'm not talking about extraordinary things. I'm just talking about normal everyday things. We were able to move out of a rental situation in California where we were in 700 square feet in a duplex. It cost us $2,300 a month in rent. We were never late with our rent, but when it became very obvious that our handyman business, which my husband had been a handyman in the Santa Barbara area for 20, 25 years, was suddenly going down because of the problem with immigration. And we were being outbid dramatically with the jobs from people who said, we'll go ahead and do a job for $8 an hour. Well, you can't sustain $8 an hour. So we were forced to make that decision in 2015 to basically pack up in the 16-foot Penske truck, put 2 cats in the Honda Element, and we bought a house sight unseen, thank goodness to Zoom and to Zillow. And we came here to South Carolina, of all places. And
You got to have a Southern accent. So you're
I
in
know
the
you
South
do.
Carolina.
And it is funny because we have next door neighbors who needed some help. Uh, we were supposed to pick up her husband, and she kept saying, "I want you to go to Cedar Lane." I went, "Okay, what did you just say?" "I want to go to Cedar Lane." I went, and I finally stopped her and I said, "I am so sorry. I do not mean to sound rude, but I haven't the foggiest idea what you just said." And she had to literally write it out. Sure enough, it was Cedar, Cedar, Cedar Lane. Okay, now we could go ahead and pick up her husband. But
Well, I don't know whether well, obviously I haven't said on this show. I think I did it on a conversation show, but I got I know this is about 40 years ago, more than 40, probably close to 50 years ago. I got into an automobile accident in Odessa, Texas. And the Rangers stopped by, and I was, at that point, was still living in New York, so I spoke, 10 times as fast as I speak now as New York. Plus, I was excited. Rangers didn't understand me, but then when they talk like with cotton in the mouth. I could not understand them, so I had to slow down, and they had to speed up. And it reminded me of Winston Churchill said, "We're two countries separated by a common language." That's what you're talking about. But I wanted to go back to you to talk about, you say America is in the worst shape ever.
Yeah.
And I don't see that. I see this, we have certain problems, but I say, number one, the stock market is going up, which might be manipulated by the rich, but it's not only the rich. It's the poor. The only problem, a major problem I have, which I agree with you, is immigration. And that's on both parties. Neither of the parties have an answer to it. They both complain about it. But it reminds me of the Democrat, the Republican that you like or they used to like so much, the ex-president. He's always talking. He's always complaining. He was always complaining about, oh, this is not right, like the Obamacare. And we're going to replace this with. He has never so far had come up with a plan for health.
Well, he was a little preoccupied, Malcolm, with the Russia gate and all the other things.
But everybody, I mean, look at the going back, look at the Republicans now and investigating Biden. They want to impeach him. And they said, well, what did he do wrong? He said, we don't know, but I know he did something wrong. And they said, well, his son. Oh, yeah, that's his son. Oh, yeah, no, but
I hate to remind you, and we were not going to necessarily get into politics here, but we will just a little bit. I used to be a news reporter in Los Angeles until I decided to leave the business, and I became a banker. And I worked with some of the big firms. Bank of America was the last place. And those suspicious activity reports, the SAPs, they are quite the damning evidence. That is money that is coming from sources, apparently coming through from places like China, from Ukraine, a whole variety of different places that ended up somehow or another in with the Biden family.
Yeah.
I think that's
Let me
enough to be able to take a look and see exactly what exactly is going on. I do find it, and once again, I didn't necessarily want to get involved in politics, but now that we're here, I do think that President Biden is really having a difficult time with maintaining the office of presidency. You can see it not only in his inability to be able to get it up and down stairs, but the slurring that's going on. And I feel very sorry for him. I feel more sorry for us because we are now being basically victimized with a very weak leader. And the problem at this point right now, and he's a human being, for heaven's sakes, but the difficulty is with this particular president, he can't put two sentences together without flubbing. I mean, the Grand Canyon is the ninth wonder of the world. I mean, I don't mean to make fun.
No, but I just recently published something about the misstatements of Trump. But the question is, I agree with you. I agree with you. Both of them are too old. I mean, Trump is 2 years younger. It's not that, all of a sudden it's it's a shame. And I don't know how you do it. It's a shame that this country is being run by people who are no longer, who maybe have 5 to 10 more years to be involved or, alive. They are old people. This is not, I want somebody that's looking ahead 20, 30 years that's going to be around. I need someone like, I would want maybe someone in their 40s and their 50s that have the vim and vigor. I know as I get old, not that my mental capacity is limited, but my energy is limited. My ability to get around is limited. The things that I wanted to do at one time, I don't want to do anymore. And I'm sure that people in their 70s and 80s, it's the same way. And it's a shame that this country cannot produce politicians or leaders that basically are in their 40s and their 50s, even in their 60s. But we have two leaders now of both parties. One's going to be 81 if he becomes president, if is reelected, and the other will be 79 if he's elected. I mean, there's not that much of a difference. And
well,
again,
I must say that once again, I do think that you need to look rather than at the individuals. I really prefer to look at the policies. The policies that were put forward obviously are approved by the various presidents and what have you, whether that be a Biden or be a Trump. But the policies that were put forward by the prior administration, I do believe helped more Americans in their everyday lives than what's happening right now. I mean, we go to the grocery store at this point, and this is talking about self-reliance. We've had to dramatically cut back on a whole variety of different things, and that's just being responsible. That's coping with the situation. But I don't like the fact that we're being told that inflation is going down. I've not seen prices going down, Malcolm, and I don't quite know what to do other than what we're doing, which is essentially cutting back on everything across the board.
Well, first of all, I think number one, our country has been spoiled.
Come off it. We are the best. You come off it. What we need to now be punished?
No, I love that. I forget it was. I think it's it's from Newsroom or Network. They're Jeff Daniels, and you can look it up on YouTube.
Okay.
And he was plays a part of a news reporter. And in fact, maybe I'll send that to you if I could find it. And there's a student in the in the audience. Him and several other reporters are in the audience, and the question was, why do you consider the U.S. the best country to live in, the best country in the world? And all of these, have the freedom, this and that. And Jeff Daniels and said, "Well, you want to know the truth? We're not the best country in the world." And he goes to the thing as far as education, we are. And it was, we're 26 in education. And he gave all these categories of life that we are in the mid-20s or in the teens, and other countries are better in healthcare, in education, in wealth. So again, I think we as Americans, we think in the grandiose type of things. Oh, we're the best because it's USA all the way, blah blah blah. I think basically we're very I don't know if the word is egotistic as being Americans, that we think we're the best. And take a look at, not that I enjoy being an American. I mean, I'm proud of being an American, but there's certain things that I recognize that we're not the best. And as far as and the thing which is major, I think right now with this country is the immigration. But nobody has done anything about it. I
Well,
listen. I don't know if Kamala Harris is now doing all these things. She said there was a bill on the table that they had from day one for immigration. It's never even been brought up in Congress. I don't know what the bill is. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's great, but it should have been talked about. They haven't
well,
had
I,
it.
I agree with you, the situation with immigration, and I'll tell you a story if we have time to be able to talk about the situation of immigration, because the border situation is going to be impacting. If it hasn't impacted you already in your community, it will impact. But I think to simplify the situation, I do not understand, since we have ports of entry, why do we not direct those immigrants to the ports of entry? Now, we had Ellis Island. That was a port of entry. That's where people went to come to the United States. We have ports of entry. Why are we not enforcing ports of entry? Pretty simple to do.
Why aren't we enforcing the immigration laws that we've had, where people could
Well,
come if
that's
it
that's the
it, it
whole problem,
no,
is
no,
why
no,
are
no,
we not
but people
following
had
the laws?
but people had a way of coming into this country, and they came in as it was need, if they were endangered, or if it was monetary, famine, and they had a way of getting in. They don't
Well,
have that way.
they didn't sneak under barbed wire. They didn't ford the Rio Grande. They came through the ports of
I,
entry.
I
Pretty
don't know.
simple.
I'll tell you, I know a lot of people living in this country here now that I'm in California, that the way they got in this country through the Rio Grande, it might have been 60, 70, 80 years ago. People were going through the Rio
Well,
Grande. Of course,
you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
We had the
yeah.
Ellis Island. The Ellis Island experiment worked.
But, but,
Why
but,
are we not using
but
ports of entry?
it's a whole different time. I mean, people came into this country, uh, they were, by boat. And, the Statue of Liberty, the first thing they saw was the Statue of Liberty. They don't come by boat anymore. They come
Well,
by
they are
plane.
also being escorted, and I do believe at this point right now that we are basically aiding the cartels,
I,
and these
I,
poor people are being asked to pay 5, 10, 15, twenty thousand dollars.
I
Where
agree.
in the where in the devil are they going to come up with? Do you have $20,000? That
But I have a question for you, which is
yeah,
which I just thought about now. The cartels are making a lot of money off of drugs in this country, right? Who's buying the
absolutely.
drugs?
I know, I
Who
know,
has the money to buy drugs?
I know.
If the U.S. citizenship in this country would not buy drugs, the cartels wouldn't smuggle them in because there'd be no profit value.
Well, you know that they're being also put into pills that are being marketed
Right.
online, and that
I
fentanyl is being put in. So,
Yeah, but you've seen the movie with the opioids
yes, I
and
have.
how that was pushed by a major drug company, and they were
Yes.
lied to, and they did. I mean, there are lots of problems, but I don't think that we're really worse off than when I was growing up.
I think we are considerably
No,
worse
no,
off
no, no,
than
no, no,
when we were growing up.
because we talk about the price of things, and we say, oh yeah, back in the 70s and 80s,
No,
it
but I
was so.
mean, but Malcolm, I mean, when people can be fired because they use the wrong
Oh
pronouns,
yeah, well that
and
yeah.
when the banks are being asked by the Department of Justice, and this came out day before yesterday, my bank, Bank of America, whom I used to work
Yeah.
for, is now doing searching of transactions that have the word Trump or MAGA, or whether I went to the Bass Pro Shop. Oh my goodness. Or if I
I
went
agree
to
that
Dick's Sporting Goods.
I
I
agree
mean,
there's
what
lots of
the
room, but
devil?
let's
What the
talk about
devil?
economics.
Mhm.
When I was a teenager, I got jobs that were like $1 an hour. I mean, is that fair? I mean,
No, I worked one of my first jobs, $1.43 an hour. And of course, at the time, the minimum wage was $1.65.
Going back, I want to hear what you were taking personal responsibility. I mean, we got off on this tangent, which I really didn't want to get off. Tell us about you were telling me a story about how you just the good neighbor policy.
Well, the good neighbor policy, I think, is absolutely critical in terms of making sure that you have personal responsibility. And that personal responsibility not only goes for yourself and your family, but more importantly, to your neighborhood. We had a situation across the street in which we had befriended our neighbors, and we had helped him go visit his wife on a regular basis. That she was down in medical care at one of the veterans hospitals, and we would go down 30, 40 miles, take him down regularly to be able to visit his wife. Unfortunately, his wife passed away this last October, and then within 2 weeks, he passed away as well from a broken heart, I do believe at this point. He loved his wife very, very much. The house is now abandoned. And as I decided to go ahead and get my will in place, and I think that was kind of a message from God, get your will in place, Deborah. I said, okay, will do. I mentioned this to the attorney that I had retained, same attorney that helped us get the house. And she said, don't get involved. Don't get involved. Well, we've had temperatures here. We're about ready to have another hard freeze. We had a hard freeze day before yesterday. We were down in the zeros here in South Carolina. Very unusual, but we get them every so often. And all of a sudden, like I said, I'm not a highly religious person but I've become highly religious at this point. I got a little tap on the shoulder. Little tap on the shoulder said, Deb, that house's pipes are going to freeze. And once those pipes freeze and they thaw, they're going to burst. That house is abandoned and you'd better do something about it. So I ended up not listening to my attorney's advice. And I called the family and I said, I want your permission to go into the house. I want to turn off the water and make sure all of the pipes are bled. And she was a little surprised. Why would you be so concerned? We got to be concerned about our neighbors. That's part of personal responsibility. We're Americans. We're concerned about other people. And sure enough, we went on in. The place was a complete utter wreck, but that's fine. And we turned off all of the pipes, called back to the lady, and she couldn't believe that we had actually done that. We need more of that kindness. We need to have concern. We need to have that sense of community, which I believe at this point we've started to lose. And that's one of the reasons that I want to be able to do and continue this podcast with you, Malcolm, because it's important to get the word out. Personal responsibility goes to yourself, your family, your community, your city, your state, and to the nation. It's very, very important. And guess what? It's being an American. And I got to tell you, this is the best. I have been around the world. This is the best place to encourage business, to encourage being able to make yourself better than perhaps your family were. And it was funny because the comment that she made back to me was, I can't believe that you would help us this way. I can't pay you. And I said, you just say thank you. And that's it. She said, thank you. Thank you. And that's
well, as a saying go, all you need is love.
Perhaps, and a thank you.
And well, yeah, that comes with it. But that's where you can do, as I say, every little bit helps. Or it's the old Confucius thing: a trip of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. There has to be something. Someone has to reach out.
And we need to remember that on a regular basis. And regardless of your politics, it doesn't make any difference. We've
Right.
got to help one
I,
another.
I always see the what was it, the Father Flanagan in Boys Town, and they have there's a kid holding another kid on the shoulder, and he said, and it's he's not Heavy Father, he's my brother, and that's it. We're all brothers in a way. We're all related to each other because we're here in this world. What happens now? I mean, the world is so small. You're talking about. Uh, I mean, right now, like I'm talking to you, you're in South Carolina, I'm in California. I mean, it's impossible. I was just talking, I did a show. I was talking to one of my co-hosts is in Portugal. And I did a show before you. My guest was in Quebec. I mean, it's all now, and we're talking to each other on the phone or on
Isn't it
on the
wild?
Zoom.
Isn't it absolutely completely wild? I love it.
And it's like you're away, but you're really not away. I probably see you more now than when I did a show on the radio, and you were in Santa Barbara.
That's right. That's absolutely right. The technology is marvelous, and
Right.
it certainly can be used to be able to keep us all connected. It needs to be.
Right. And again, there's certain things that we can't control, but what I think we can control is ourselves. And there's too much hatred that's going around. There's too much hatred being spewed on the TV and radio and all the shows.
Well, it's interesting. I believe it was David Axelrod. He's a Democratic strategist, and
Yeah.
I could be wrong. It could have been James Carver. It could have been James Carver. At any rate, the gist of the comment back to him, in fact, I think it was Jamie Dimon, who's the chairman of JP Morgan. And the gist of the comment was that people need to stop demonizing the other side. There is
Right.
something to be learned from quote unquote the other side. And he was talking specifically about demonizing Trump, demonizing MAGA, all of those things that are being said. It's
Well,
it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive.
on both sides. I mean, the thing what you could getting back to Trump, I hate his name call. I don't remember people doing name calling and making fun out of people before. Before he got into politics. I don't remember that. I might be wrong, but I don't
I
remember.
think you are wrong. There's been a number of times, a lot of name calling. I do remember, and I was just a kidlet at the time, but Barry Goldwater, and remember the atom bomb
Right.
commercial. Remember that?
I don't remember the atom bomb commercial, but I remember that they said he would destroy the world because the world would blow up.
Well,
He was
it scared me as a kid. It scared the bejesus out of me when I saw the atom bomb thing. Oh my Lord, you're not voting for him, are you? But no, I think it's been going on. The politics
I don't know about
just
scary, but it was yeah. I mean every age has its boogeymans. I remember when I was in public school and we had air raid drills. What we got under the desk. What did we get under the desk in case there was an atom bomb that was exploded? What the hell would protect me from my desk if the school blew up? I mean now, talking about bringing it back to modern times. Now they have drills for shooters.
yeah, they do. And of course,
And that's
was it
more frightening because
Department of Justice just came out with a report yesterday about the Vivaldi massacre of
I
21
didn't read
students
that.
plus.
But
Well,
yeah,
they
anyway.
basically said that law enforcement was slow to respond. They were all standing on ceremony, and they waited 77 minutes before they went in
Oh
and
yeah,
removed
that was
the
a
shooter.
and then
Uh,
that was a total miscommunication among the law enforcement. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It can be a frightening world out there. There's certain things, but it's not to shout to people who are bad people. People are suffering, whether they're legal or illegal. They're suffering. The people that are out on the street. It's not what, oh, let's kick them back to their own country. No, we got to do, well, they're here and we got to do something about them. And
but
it's a
our
fact
real
of
issue
life.
at this point right now, why are they not coming through the official ports
Right.
of entry?
Right. Well, there has to be, again, a pox on both parties. I'm not saying one is better than the other. They're both. not legislating. I think both of them should be, the salary should be suspended. I think it's a tragedy that you know, and for I think Thanksgiving and Christmas they got like 4 weeks off. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're going. They didn't settle anything, and now they can't even come up with a budget that's more than a stopgap thing. So you know, we won't go into a bankruptcy. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, these supposed to be men that are leading our country.
Well, I do have to say that since I've become involved in local politics, that all of my representatives certainly know me. And I think it's very, very important that everyone that's viewing this podcast do the exact same thing. We need to tell our lawmakers what they are doing right and what they are doing
Right.
wrong. And it's absolutely incumbent upon us. And I know that our prior conversation said, well, California is so much bigger and what have you. No, Malcolm, you could make a dent.
Yeah.
And you need to, please, for heaven's sakes, if you see something that needs to be taken care of, you need to call those lawmakers. You need to let them know what the devil is going on. Because too many times we sit back and say, oh, they don't care. Well, guess what? They need to care.
They need to, especially if they want to be reelected. But the thing
Absolutely.
is, I think most people, I mean, the problems are becoming so vast that most people sort of like are giving up and they're just paying attention to their own pocketbook and to their own existence. And you can't do that. You have to look at it. You have to be concerned about, you know, your fellow man, not only yourself. You have to be, you know, you know, it's what's happening now in the world. People are suffering. People are being killed. What do we do about it? I don't know. I don't know the answer. Yeah,
Well,
what's
I think that what you said that the journey begins, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. That's what this podcast is all about. Starting that first step and being that personal responsibility and making sure that things are tight in your own home. And we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about how to budget, how to manage your finances. Buying a home, for example, is going to be the best way to be able to prevent. Sorry.
As we're talking about, I'm basically a moderator. I know what the problems are, but I don't have the answers. If I had the answers, I'd probably run for office. Well, maybe I wouldn't. But again, I think you're hitting the right spot. I was listening to the radio earlier, and they were talking about how newspapers are losing their business because now, you know, there's really the newspapers cannot get a beat on radio and television and computers. People know all the news before it. So you have featured stories, but the news is not there anymore. It's not for the daily newspaper because by the time I get the LA Times or the New York Times, I know it already. I've heard the stories. I've heard it on cable TV. So this is a bright time for you to do the transition from being a reporter and on a newspaper to being a reporter on Zoom, on
A
the internet.
reporter on life. And I have
Right.
to tell you that there is, when we made the decision to come here to South Carolina, it was a momentous decision. And I must say that I'm not a hysterical person, but when I packed up the last bit and I shut the door and got into the Honda Element, at that point I broke down and
Yeah,
in sobbing. And it
I can
took me,
understand. I can understand that. But anyway, please don't break down sobbing, but our half hour
I
is up.
won't.
Our half hour is up.
Oh, doggone it.
So next week we'll talk about, you know, I was going to say what might be interesting if you have your people around you, your advisors, and you're talking about property, buying house or apartment living or taxes. Maybe ask one of your neighbors to join us, and we could do a three-way. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. What we could do, you know, the three or four on the Zoom, and let's talk.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and post the fact that we're back up on the air again onto Facebook. And it's been interesting because when I did that initial post, I had gotten some response back from some folks that I used to work with when I of all things had to go to work at Kmart. Yes, Kmart. I had to do blue light specials. Yes, I did. But it was a way of being self-sufficient, and I did
Yeah.
work out fine. And I did get Jennifer did contact me and said, "Oh my gosh, yes, I would love to talk about it," because she ended up, of all things, going to Guam. That's where she followed her soon-to-be husband,
Mhm.
and we talked about self-reliability and responsibility. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I would be delighted to talk about
Okay,
that."
well,
So
we
there's
have
a lot to be learned. A lot to be
we
learned.
have shows I think lined up for the next 5, 6 years.
There we go. Well, I
Anyway,
hope
remember,
everybody enjoyed it. You do have a great variety of shows, so I can urge people to look at Malcolm Presents.
prevents MalcolmPresents.com
Yeah, that's it.
and go over and now it's Manning Up with Deborah
Manning
Manning.
up.
Deborah, have a great week.
You too. My
See you
best to your
next
dear
Friday.
wife.
Okay,
Bye bye now.
mind the fish. Bye.